Hello, and welcome to Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. This is still a relatively new channel, so if you got here through the algorithm, please consider hitting like and subscribe. I am very excited about my guest today. This is someone I've been wanting to talk to for a while. I'm so grateful that he was patient with me, and you guys are going to, most of you are going to recognize him. I'm going to be talking to Chris Gore, who is the publisher of FilmThreat.com and the host of Film Threat podcast. He's the author of several books, most notably the Ultimate Film Festival Survival Guide. He's also a filmmaker and TV producer, having written and produced My Big Fat Independent Movie. He's also appeared as a film expert on lots of television shows. He used to be a regular on G4 TV's Attack of the Show. Please welcome Chris Gore.
Keri,
Hello,
it's such a pleasure to be on here because I watch you and I think you do amazing interviews. And
thank you. That's flattering.
And you're so great on FNT. Love it when you turn up there.
I have such fun with those guys. That's like, because sometimes, you know, when I go on interviews, it's a lot of talking about my old belief system, social justice, which I love doing. I think it's very important. That's why I do this show. But it's nice to be on a show where you're talking about that, but it's in a tangential way. You're having fun with these topics, and you are kind of critiquing woke, but it's just fun. Anyway, I know that you have fun with those guys too.
Love it. Yeah, I've appeared as well, but we've never been on FNT at the same time. So one day the stars will align, I think.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you specifically is because of all of your work in film and entertainment. And sometimes when people ask me about, you know, what is your podcast about? What's Deprogrammed about? And if they haven't seen it before, I'll tell them, well, some people might call it a political podcast, but it's not really. I mean, I'll talk about politics if it comes up, if it's in the news, but my focus is really on culture and about ideology and culture. And I think when ideas and belief systems spread, I think they tend to start culturally before they have any political impact. And so culture is where it's at. It's what's important to me. And you work in culture, you work in film. And so why don't you start off by telling our audience just a little bit more about your background? I read some of your bio, but who is Chris Gore? Why did you start working in this field?
Well, I became a film fanatic, very passionate about movies since I was a kid. I think that every one of us, every person has an epiphany movie. It's a movie that you see that makes you fall in love with movies. And you realize the power of cinema to change the way you think about things. I think it's the most powerful form of propaganda because you're in a darkened room with a bunch of people all reacting at once. So for some people, it was a movie like Gone with the Wind or West Side Story, maybe when they were younger, or it could be Ghostbusters. It doesn't matter what the movie is. It's a movie that you realize the power of cinema. For me, and I'm not unique in this, it was Star Wars. I saw Star Wars and that kind of blew my mind. And that made me want to find out about the behind the scenes of films. But the thing that really kind of freaked me out as a kid was, this is going to sound very strange. Okay. I have vivid memories of myself as a kid, but I didn't like movies initially. I thought they were stupid because now imagine this is like single digit age version of me thinking we would watch movies with my family because watching movies was a family experience. You'd gather around, like Gone with the Wind is tonight. It's a 2-night experience, or West Side Story, or whatever the film was. It was a big deal. 10 Commandments. You'd sit around. And the thing that bothered me was, I'm a little kid, remember, no one ever went to the bathroom in movies.
Wait, you don't mean the people watching it. You mean the people in the movie, the characters.
People in the movie, the characters were like, never went to the bathroom. Like, how can what's happening on the TV be real if none of the characters eat or go to the bathroom?
Let me just interrupt for a second. That's kind of like how in movies, none of the characters ever say goodbye when they're hanging up the phone.
Right. Yeah, there's all sorts of those weird movie tropes, but this is one that's like, okay, like people never go to the bathroom in movies. Now, I'm a little kid. My family thought this was hilarious, right? Like, haha, very funny. My dad then took me to a retrospective screening of the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick. And in the film, one of the characters goes to the bathroom, and it freaked me out because then I thought, well, this movie must be real because characters do, simple human things. And then,
Yeah.
of course, Nicole Kidman later on in Eyes Wide Shut takes a tinkle right in front of her husband, played by Tom Cruise. So, and there's whole websites now dedicated to when people go to the bathroom in movies, and you'll never guess the actor that has gone to the bathroom more in films than any other actor. And you'll never guess.
Jim Carrey.
Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks. This is all documented. There are whole websites dedicated to characters going to the bathroom. Tom Hanks, in The Green Mile, it's a story plot because he has a urinary tract infection. In Forrest Gump, he says, "I gotta pee." In so many of his movies, I feel like if you want to cast Tom Hanks in your film, just write a scene where the character goes to the bathroom because he tends to like that. It's odd. And Castaway, he goes to the bathroom on the plane during the. Seriously, no, you start to notice these things. If you've been around as long as I have, you notice trends, not just in politics, media, whatever, but in movies for sure. And that blew my mind as a kid. Of course, became a Kubrick fan, and then just Star Wars kind of like took me over the edge, and I was just like, I want to be a part of film in whatever way. And so there you go. That's sort of the beginnings, at least. That's a little version of me. So.
How old were you when you saw Star Wars?
Oh God, I was 11. I was 11 years old, 11, 12 years old, right around. It was 1977. I was born in 65, which is why I'm older than Gary Beekler on Nerdrotic. So there you go. I'm the ancient one. But, I had like very cool parents where they were very much encouraged me to like, don't go see the mainstream movies. Like I grew to really despise John Hughes movies because I never related to those kids. Those were rich white kids from the Chicago suburbs. And I was, because my parents separated and divorced when I was like 9 years old, I was white, lower class kid, right? Like always worked a job, always had like a newspaper out. I worked restaurants when I was 14. I worked at a video store when I was 16. I always had to work to be able to get what I wanted. I think that I could look back and say, oh, that was so like, no, it was the best thing ever, was having that experience, because I see these, this is going to sound, I see a lot of people today that make excuses for why they can't achieve, or, this thing hasn't happened. It's like, no, you hire yourself. You choose to. When I look at the projects that I've done, whether it's a book project or a film project or whatever, nobody ever hired me. It was always like, I just decided to do it. And I made a list of all the steps to do it. And I've written several books. And in fact, I'll give a little offer to your viewers right now. When I wrote my first book, I would get on the phone. My friends would say, well, how did you do it? And I'd have a 2-hour-long conversation explaining how I wrote this book. And then I thought, well, I'm tired of having these conversations. So I wrote this essay. It's about 10 pages, like a pamphlet, effectively, that just tells you steps of how to write a book. It's not even worth a book on how to write a book. So if you go to filmthreat.com/contact, you message me, I'll send you a PDF of that essay.
Okay.
And it'll just tell you how to write a book. If you write 500 words every day for 60 days or so, you'll have around between 500 and 1,000 words. You'll have a book. Average book is between 50 and 60,000 words. It's actually very easy. And that sort of helped establish some sort of credibility, having written several books.
Yeah. So you're a creator. You're an entrepreneur. You're someone who's, like you said, you're not waiting for someone to give you a job somewhere. You have a vision and you go for it. You have a goal and you set it and you take the steps to get there.
It's weird. I even like odd story. I'm a college dropout. And what I did is when my mother took us on this like sort of very life-altering trip to visit my uncle in California, because I'm originally from Michigan, around the Detroit area, Royal Oak. And we went on this trip, and I said to my mom, we did all the touristy things. I said, I want to go to one place. I want to go to the campus of USC, because that's where George Lucas went to that school. And I was an admirer of George Lucas. And I went in the bookstore on the campus of USC, and I bought all the books I could afford as part of the film studies program. And then the books I couldn't buy, and stuff in my luggage. I wrote down the names of the titles and the authors of those books.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made a list and I brought it to my film class at Wayne State University, which is a commuter school. And I said, look, if we can't get the same education as these rich assholes going to USC, then we can at least read the same books as them. So years later, I wrote this book called The Ultimate Film Festival Survival Guide, which doesn't tell you anything about how to make a movie, but it does tell you how to get your movie into a film festival, how to sell it to a distributor, how to get a publicist, all these business things. It's all about the business side of the brain.
What a great practical book.
Yeah, it's to me, to be a successful artist, I feel like you need to balance the two sides of your brain. One is the creative side and this, and we're going to do that. And the other one is the sort of more logical side of like, no, let's be business minded. Let's just, let's keep working at the bank. We'll continue this book. And there you have Kafka. So, anyways, but I then years later, I wrote this book and it became required reading as part of independent film studies. So I've done speaking engagements at like AFI, at USC. And I always tell this story. I'm like, I didn't pay for the education you're paying for now, or your parents are paying for, but I read all the same books. And now you have to buy my book and I'm a college dropout. So what does that tell you? You know?
You can do it yourself.
You can do it yourself. Quentin Tarantino dropped out of school in the 8th grade. And Paul Thomas Anderson basically said, look, just listen to DVD commentaries or Laserdisc commentaries at the time when he was coming up. So I do think, now I don't think that perhaps for the medical field, you should necessarily go rogue like that. I think you need some practical experience if you're going to be a brain surgeon. But when it comes to liberal arts, which, I guess, I don't know, does anyone do a liberal arts program now? I see what college has become, and I think I dodged a bullet. It's really become indoctrination factories and how to be a good worker, except they have ill prepared these students by not giving them the actual skills that they would benefit from in the marketplace. And so they've created useless positions that don't make sense.
Were you one of these people who thought, I used to have maybe four years ago or so, when I first started waking up from this belief system I'd been in for 20 years, social justice, I started criticizing it online or trying to have conversations about it. And I encountered some of my liberal friends who were saying, well, I do see this ideology as a problem, but this kind of indoctrination, it's just contained to college campuses. You're making a big deal out of it. It's just on college campuses. And these people who are learning all this at college, they're not going to be able to survive in the real world, which has proven to be false because, as you said, they're creating these useless positions for them. Were you someone who believed that it maybe wouldn't escape college campuses, and that these people who are being indoctrinated in these factory schools, that they wouldn't have any influence or they wouldn't be able to survive? Did you ever believe that?
Yeah, I didn't think it would make it out into the real world at all. And before I want to elaborate on that, but I want to say, Keri, you need to write a book. You should write a book, because I think what it would do is, one, you could self-publish and make a decent amount of money on it. And I think that your story, I've heard it on different types of podcasts. Whenever you tell it, I feel like it's such a big topic and it is relatable to so many people. I would just encourage you to write a book. And if I can help support you in any way, you should do that.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And I think it also puts you on another level when you're a published author, right? Whether you publish it through a major publisher, and you certainly could do that, or, self-publish. Look at how many have distinguished themselves by that. And I think that you're in that class. You really need to do it. Deprogrammed would be a great name for a book, I think.
Thank you very much. I'll talk to you about this offline. My biggest thing with writing, I'll tell you about it later. Okay, go ahead.
But when I was, I'm Gen X, right? So I grew up because my parents got divorced when I was young, and then if I wanted anything, I was really taught the work ethic. My grandparents were kind of my surrogate parents, and they grew up during the Depression era. So, and they're both immigrants, Russian and Polish, and came over here and basically taught me good values, work values, real simple. You want something, you work for it, so I had 3 newspaper routes and had multiple jobs, but I had money. I could buy comic books and,
Mm.
video games. And I had a TV in my room and a VCR when I was a kid, because why? Because I worked for it.
You worked
And
for it.
learning that, I never forgot those lessons. If I wanted something, work for it. Nothing was handed to me. And it's why I, dropped out of college, because my parents were kind of arguing back and forth between like, who's going to pay for school. And I was like, I'm just in the middle here. I'm going to, I made a choice of like, okay, I can spend money on school, or I could put it towards this little zine that I created called Film Threat, which I'll put a pin in that and get back to it later. But because I'm Gen X, I grew up with question everything. Question everything. I don't take anything at face value. I don't take politicians, who I think we revere far too greatly.
Yes.
I think politicians are snake oil salesmen at best. And the book Dune is the thing that really changed my life when I read it when I was 14, because people misinterpret what that book is about. Frank Herbert wrote it effectively about the danger of charismatic leaders. He despised JFK because JFK got us involved in Vietnam. So, but he actually liked Frank Herbert, the author of Dune, actually liked Nixon because he said, well, that guy's just an asshole on the surface, right? Like, we know who he is. Like, he's right there. He's not trying to pretend to be something else. That guy is an asshole. And JFK is like this good looking, chiseled jawed, beautiful wife, beautiful family. Like, he seduced the American public into doing things that we should not have gotten involved in. And
it's hard not to draw comparisons between
right,
those two and Obama and Trump. I was
right,
someone who was seduced by Obama twice. He's very charismatic, He's the president they say you want to have a beer with, and that was true.
right. Yeah, well,
And
George
Trump
Bush
is
too.
just an asshole.
Right, right. But there's truth in when you listen, when you sort of just like take out the emotion, which the mainstream media riled everyone up about Trump, and just listen to the actual things he's saying. I mean, even the thing about bleach, I read like that kind of planted that as a thing. Well, that's how, I don't even know if we should go down this road, but that's how India basically things didn't spread in India, because what they would do is take a drop of bleach, literally a drop, and put it in a full bottle of water to gargle with. And that's how things didn't escalate to a large degree in India, right? Less developed country than ours. So, but the whole theme of Herbert's book with Paul Atreides, he's this charismatic leader that gets everyone involved in a galactic wide jihad. And we should not trust leaders who are charismatic. And that book kind of changed my life at the age of 14. And I read it like every summer. And then I read like up until like God Emperor of Dune, which was around at the time. And then I saw the Dune movie, and the Dune movie was such a colossal disappointment, because I love David Lynch as a filmmaker. I like
Me too.
just like, to me, I'm always attracted to counterculture, anything, whether it's music, whether it's books, whether it's comic books, whatever it is, movies, anything counterculture is something that I naturally have gravitated to since I was a kid, because I never related to those John Hughes movies. I never knew, and this is a weird thing, but I never knew I was poor as a kid, because I feel like if you're loved, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
If you're loved as a child, that doesn't matter. But when I went, it's like, oh, the kids are all in the ski club or going skiing. Can I do that? And I didn't have the money. My family didn't have the money. It's like, no, we don't have money for ski club. You know what it costs to get the skis and this and the travel. And like, oh, I didn't realize that it's like, oh, I got to work for things that I want. Right.
Yeah.
And so I didn't relate.
You're reminding me of Dolly Parton, where she talks about her coat of many colors, which she turned into a song, but it was about her mom. I mean, and they were dirt poor, and she had lots of siblings, and her mom would take hand-me-down clothes from other people, and she made her this patchwork coat out of lots of different scraps. And Dolly talks about it and says, she loved it. Her mother loved her, and this is this beautiful coat that she made. And it wasn't until she wore it to school and everyone made fun of her for wearing rags that she realized that she was poor, but she didn't feel poor.
Yeah, I didn't feel poor. I didn't know. It wasn't until high school that it hit me like, oh, these other kids can do things I can't do, and my family can't afford. But it didn't matter to me. I think it was also a different era. I had like 2 pairs of pants and maybe 5-6 t-shirts that last me the week, right? And it's like, that was fine. I had patches on my pants when there was a hole, and then I grew out of it, new pair of pants, right? Like that's what I'm getting for my birthday. But it was a different time. It's also like not a time where I remember going out to eat maybe a couple times a year, and fast food was a treat if we ever got it, and so now I think that like we've been conditioned to just eat out too much, or I'll cringe at my friends whose kids will order $30 from Starbucks, from DoorDash, and I'm like, you can make coffee at home. There are many brands of coffee, Keep Grind Coffee and Coffee Brand Coffee. I'm giving plugs to other YouTubers.
Eat Grind, yeah.
There you go. But no, it was a time where just like you did things yourself. And every time we would go out to eat, my grandmother would say, I can make a better chicken than this. This is terrible. I can make better food. Let me make you. And she would make, and they also taught me things like, they had a huge backyard. We would go and we would pick apples. We'd go into these places. They'd weigh your baskets. Then you'd go in and you would pick apples and raspberries and this, and she would just make homemade stuff, put it in the pantry. And that was it. Like going to the grocery store was like, well, we have to settle for this stuff. It's like, no, we make stuff at home. So I'm very much learned at an early age, look, everything is DIY. How do you do it that way? And that would apply to anything that I would do, a creative project, or, even the beginnings of Film Threat, which was very handmade, and just learning how to do a book, like writing a book and learning how to do a book, or making a film, making a feature film, and then appearing on television, doing other things. I fell into those things. It's like just having this spirit, like most of the projects, I've never had a job where I didn't also have a side project, always, never not. So
you can know. So you were talking about Dune, you were talking about charismatic leaders and why we shouldn't trust them. And then you said you were going to come back to put a pin in starting Film Threat.
Yeah, I'll come back.
Would you want to? Okay.
But like, truthfully, like, it's just question everything was just like part of my mantra. It was the music I listened to was question everything, listened to everything from like the Dead Kennedys to Black Flag to, a lot of punk rock. So I grew up during the punk rock era, right? Like the Sex Pistols, Malcolm McLaren, who, just learned ways to manipulate the media to build up this band, the Sex Pistols, who are legendary. I'm curious to see that new series on Hulu about the Sex Pistols, but like that was just sort of like ingrained in everything. And so then alternative media, whether it was like zines were a big thing. This was alternative press.
I remember zines. Can I ask you, why do you think that? Because I'm on the tail end of Gen X also, and it seems like a lot of people who used to live and die by question everything, question authority. With this new cultural revolution that's unfolding, or whatever you want to call it, that's happening the past few years, a lot of those people are now fully on board with trust the government, trust the mainstream media, trust, do whatever they say, cool with authoritarianism. What happened?
I think that the mainstream media, it's not as if they haven't always been like this. Now they're just doing it right in front of our face, where stories can be debunked that are on, that are on the mainstream media, that your CNNs, your MSNBC, and even your Fox. Like, and I began to notice, I believe this stuff has always been here. And we used to call it, when I was in college, we used to call it just become aware. We didn't call it woke. We called it become aware. But, it was a different kind of thing. It was just be aware so it doesn't affect you. Just be aware that advertising is trying to sell you something. It could be a lie. Just be aware that the news could be lying to you. Check your sources. And that was just sort of ingrained in what I thought. What's new is with the woke ideologies trying to shut things down. I'm not a fan of, let's say I'm not a fan of country music. I actually do like country music now is rock and roll.
Yeah.
Country music is rock and roll now. But like, let's say you're not a fan of like a certain thing. The new thing is to try to shut that thing down. Even if people are enjoying that thing, that is new and that is surprising. And they're just falling in line and doing whatever the government says. I'm just kind of shocked we're here. And it's the nanny state. It's basically, I call it like children in adult-sized bodies. These are children, especially when you deal with anyone in their 20s. Luckily, I have two kids that are in their late 20s. I had kids when I was young, and they missed everything. They missed social media. They didn't have smartphones, at a time where it may have affected them. And they're both like They're both well-adjusted adults who don't care so much about social media,
Congratulations.
who don't get caught. My son is a U.S. Marine, and my daughter's an independent artist that has an Etsy business, and they avoided everything. I think they're more based than I am.
That's awesome.
My daughter wouldn't go see the new Lightyear movie because Tim Allen wasn't in it, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna go see it. So she's like, I refuse to see it. I refuse. Not Buzz Lightyear. I'm like, all right, because my daughter and I, we go see a movie once a week together. We have dinner and see a movie, and then we talk about it. You know,
what a great tradition.
well, because movies are a gateway to talk about anything, right? I mean, Roger Ebert famously said this. You can talk about life, love, loss, death, family, sex, politics, anything we discuss in life is touched upon in movies, to varying degrees. And so I find it fascinating, like this movie RRR, this Indian movie, which is on Netflix currently, which I strongly recommend that you see. RRR is an Indian movie directed by S.S. Rajamouli. It's about two historical figures from 1920, British occupied India, and they are real revolutionaries, Ram and Bhim. And it's fiction. It fictionalizes what if these two met and teamed up during the revolution, because India was not united as a country. India was just separate tribes. The British colonials came in and occupied this space. What's interesting is, I've seen this movie 4 times in the theater. I took my daughter to see it. What's interesting is hipsters that are definitely, they have a woke look. This is all I'm going to say. And you know what I'm talking about. There's like, there's a look. The uniform. And I'm like, even when I was into punk rock, I was just sort of like, I dressed pretty average. Like, fashion is not really a thing that I want to occupy time with me. If anything, I would be like Jeff Goldblum's character in The Fly and just have like a bunch of the same clothes, because that I don't have to use brain power.
You know who else does that?
Clothing.
Ernest P. Worrell. Do you remember him? I used to watch those movies when I was a kid. Ernest Saves
my God,
the World.
I love those. Yes, like, just wear the same thing, then I don't have to think about it. But and what's interesting is that this movie, on the one end, it feels like this movie is very woke, right? From the standpoint of, yes, it's, the white man is the bad guy, the British colonials are evil, and they are. Like Governor Scott, who's played by Ray Stevenson in the movie, is just vile villain. He's awesome. And it's all about pushing out it's anti-colonialism. At the same time, the movie is incredibly pro 2A, because the characters realize, if we had guns, we could drive them out. And it's all about respect for your gun and your weapon. And there's a whole subplot about trying to get guns so they can push out the invaders, and they sort of fetishize over the guns. So this movie is on vastly opposite sides of the political spectrum, it's a Rorschach test, depending on, who is watching the movie. It's also a wildly entertaining Hollywood film that has romance and humor and friendship and action. It's also very testosterone driven. Like, the men in the movie are very, I'll send you later the trailer to this film. It's a very masculine movie. And I think what Hollywood has forgotten is that who's attracted to intense masculinity is, well, men like that, and women like that too. Hence the rise of Marvel movies. It's a trope that every Marvel male character must go shirtless in the movie at some point. Every single character. So RRR, I cannot rave about that movie enough. It's on my top 10 list of films for the year. And I just strongly recommend you see it, and you can enjoy it for what it is. It's incredibly entertaining 3-hour Tollywood. It's not a Bollywood film, it's a Tollywood, even though there are a couple musical numbers in it, but they're part of the story.
Did you say Tollywood with a T?
Tollywood, yeah. What's interesting in the United States is we have one film industry. This is how we're able, this comes back to the narrative, right? Controlling the narrative, right? Mm-hmm. We have a dominant media, right, that is very left-wing. And then we have Hollywood, which is mainly driven by the same type of politics. We have only one film industry, and then we have independent film, which indie films are my passion. My show Film Threat, even though we talk about the latest mainstream Hollywood movies that are released, whatever, Thor, name it, we'll talk about it. I always recommend independent films, because independent films and independent voices is really where you can express yourself, right? But in America,
I've got one for you.
let's hear it,
Just
please.
as
I
an
want to hear it.
aside, my friend Fabio, he just did his film My Dead Dad. He just played the Austin Film Festival last year, and now it's
Oh
on
wow!
HBO. It's a
Oh
great
wow!
little independent film. I'll recommend it for anyone. I love this guy. He's great. And anyway,
I
there's
love
one
it.
for you.
Well, HBO Max has actually been aggressive about acquiring independent films, so that's great to hear. My Dead Dad. All right, that's on my. That's great. First of all, I rarely get recommendations. This is great. I love
Okay.
it.
So, but you love independent film, which
Love
that
it.
resonates with me. I worked in one of my first jobs when I was at college. One of the jobs I worked was at an independent video store, and it was just like every movie representation of an independent video store. It was this great cast of people. I think of them as a cast that I worked with, just characters. And we had just an incredible, because it wasn't a blockbuster or anything, we had just a really incredible library of independent film. And so that resonates with me.
It's just
But
that what's great about independent film is that it sort of diverts from the message that most mainstream Hollywood movies are pushing. So I'm all about like I say, alt culture, anything is kind of what I'm attracted to. So naturally, indie films. So, um, but in India they have two competing industries. They have Bollywood and Tollywood,
okay.
and that competition I believe makes those movies better. There's been a whole like wave of Indian films that are being released actually theatrically in limited release in the United States. Another one I would recommend is KGF Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, both of which are on Prime Video right now. You can check out. But what I always observed in indie film is indie film was a way for alternative messages to get out there, and a lot of woke ideas were woven into indie films. Mainstream movies in the 80s and the 70s, 80s, 90s, like we're just kind of mainstream movies were pushing sort of one thing. If there was any sort of alternate ideas, it was beneath the surface. But
Can I ask you, what is
sure,
Tollywood? I know what Bollywood films are. What are Tollywood films?
Tollywood are movies that are the language. There are several languages in India, and one is Telugu. So
Okay.
there's Hindi and Telugu are the two main ones. And so it's just a different. They're actually in physical different locations. So they just say, well, these are Bollywood movies because and these are Tollywood. So they're like,
Okay.
but it's a friendly competition, right? And I think that competition makes it better. If there was like a Hollywood, there's Hollywood, California, but if there was another full film industry that was different, I mean, Daily Wire is in effect trying to
To
create
do that.
something like that. They're trying to do it, which are, I mean, effectively they picked up some amazing independent films, the stuff that they produced or either directly or picked up. The movie Shut In was actually a script that was on the blacklist, female screenwriter who wrote that movie. And the blacklist is a list that is put out by, it was started by a guy who was like an assistant. And you can look up the TED talk he gave. And it was all these really cool indie films that were not getting greenlit, all these smaller scripts. And so they put together a list of like, these are recommended scripts that they've been around for years. No one will make them because there's something dangerous about it or whatever. And Shut In was on that list. And Film Threat we got a lot of flack just for covering movies the Daily Wire puts out. And I feel like I'm not doing my job if I don't cover those movies because they're legitimately released into the commercial
Yeah.
marketplace. Why
What
is
kind
it? It's weird. It's weird,
what
but
kind of flack are you getting? Because I
just
think
online.
they're trying to just memory hole. Like they don't want the mainstream doesn't even want to cover. They want to pretend like Daily Wire's not doing film.
Well,
Is that really
yes, they are. It's stupid. I saw Matt Walsh did a whole thing about these critics who were asked, do you want to review What Is a Woman? We'll send you a link to this movie. And they sent back like messages saying, take me off your list, screw you, whatever. And he read that and he was talking about how critics are cowardly, and I can attest to the fact that a lot of them are. They review the movies that mainstream Hollywood puts out, and there's basically sort of a general consensus among critics about what we're going to think about something. And it's not as if like my opinion doesn't always align with like, okay, that was a great movie, whatever it is, Top Gun Maverick, which I happen to really enjoy. But I tend to sort of break with that. It's interesting. Richard Linklater, who I think lives in the same place you do in Austin, Texas.
In Austin.
Probably one of my all-time favorite filmmakers. Slacker, the 1991 movie Slacker, just blew my mind. I love that movie. It's a love letter to Austin, Texas. If you have never seen Slacker, you've never seen Slacker?
Me? I don't think I've seen it. I know the name.
Gotta see that movie.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it.
But I had a conversation with him once. He was talking about reviews and like, does he pay attention to them? And he says he'll read them, and he says generally, if someone likes the movie, critics' opinions tend to just blend. They just sort of all sound the same. But he really pays attention to the critics that get a little bit more critical, a little more negative. He says sometimes it's a reflection of that person, but it's the only way he's able to learn something. And I think that's a very important point. I'm not particularly religious, but I have friends who are religious. And what bothers me about Hollywood is I think there is an actual intention to suppress religious voices in mainstream entertainment. Yeah. It's almost like laughed upon. And to me, like, I have members of my family who are religious, who go to church every week. I'm not going to tell them they're wrong about something. Belief is part of that. But one of the interesting conversations I got into with my friends who are religious is, why does God, if God is all knowing, can do anything, why does God in infinite wisdom allow pain? And my response to that is, pain is how we learn. Yes. Pain is how we learn something. If, don't touch a hot stove. Yes. Don't be involved with toxic people in a relationship. That is also a type of pain. Don't tolerate a work situation that may, compromise your mental and physical health. That is pain. Pain is this thing of like, this is how we learn. And
there's a whole chapter, Hebrews 12 in the Bible, which is about spiritual endurance. But in the chapter, it's sort of compared to physical endurance, like exercise, discipline, like physical discipline. And it's really about enduring what it calls discipline from God, which I think is about what you're talking about. I interpret that as being about pain. And they say, I think there's one verse in there that's like, discipline is not pleasurable, but it leads you to something good, just like physical discipline. Exercising every day sucks, pushing yourself sucks, but you get to this place where then you can do the marathon. And I think that's sort of similar spiritually. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it's I think that's so important. I think that what's led to this current generation of not just weak-willed children in adult-sized bodies, weak leadership. When you look at weak leadership, not saying, no, this is our mission. I almost jokingly tweeted out, Cinnabon oddly quiet on Roe v. Wade. It's not. I can't tell you how many things I have in my drafts where I'm like, I don't want the hassle. So I tweet maybe a couple times a month.
Please tweet that so I can retweet
it. Should I?
Yeah.
I went to tweet it, and then I realized Cinnabon is following me on Twitter, and I don't know why. But but like the whole thing is like,
you might lose that follow. I'm sorry.
But what's our purpose, right? Like the purpose of Cinnabon is to make delicious buns, not to have political opinions.
Right.
The same thing with Disney. This recent Lightyear movie about Buzz Lightyear failed because there was this video that came out of the not so secret agenda, right? And I have kids, and my whole thing was to protect them from what I observed was rampant, awful parenting in Los Angeles, rampant. And I'll tell you this, for those either aspiring parents or parents in the audience with young kids, you don't negotiate with parents or children. I gave my kids limited choices, right? Your choice are chicken fingers or pizza. Which do you want? For dessert, we're having pineapple. We're not having cake or pie, right? Or anything sweet. So, and fortunately, my kids are both healthy, normal sized bodies. They haven't dealt with any of those kinds of issues. Fortunately, like they ate well, and I was tough on them. But one of the worst things, and I've seen this countless times in LA, a 3-year-old pulling on a mother or father's arm, and the mother or father going, I don't know, what do you want to do? which is the last thing you want to say. Children need guidelines, they need guidance. And what's cost us is, by trying to protect children from pain, giving them participation trophies so they don't feel bad, trying to protect them from things that they need to power through, we've created this weak generation that is incapable of doing anything other than complaining quite well online. They're very good at that.
Yeah.
I tend to ignore it. So like when I got pushback for just talking about What Is a Woman, we reviewed it on the website. I think we're one of 2 Rotten Tomato reviews from filmthreat.com.
Wow.
It was written by Dante James, a writer who writes for Film Threat. He was like, I want to write about this issue. So he wrote and it's a very fair review of the movie, which I saw as well. Then we did a review on our YouTube channel, but it like, we got pushback from people like, how dare you? One guy criticized us for like, how could we had this conversation? It was like, how could I can't stand the words that are used by, the woke, so I just don't use them.
Well, it's cult lexicon. That's why it's a cult language.
I don't use it. That whole cisgender term is stupid, and anyone who ever uses it in a serious sense, I can't take them seriously. But the one thing that bothered me was there was this criticism, like, how could it was like basically 3 straight guys talking about this movie. Well, 2 of the men in the conversation, my colleague Alan Ng, we're both parents, and his daughter is 13 in school right now, battling this. Battling against this, all these things being pushed upon them. But pain is how we learn. It's important to allow children to feel pain. Like, nope, that's the way it is. And I feel like it's this, when I look at like the current leadership at a lot of these corporations, like, where's your backbone? Disney, you're a company that makes stuff for families and children. Make that, and this subplot, which is completely innocuous to me. I'm watching and it's like, oh, there's a female. So this is also the 4th Pixar movie with 2 female couple in a relationship, right?
Which movie is this?
Lightyear. So Lightyear has this scene with 2. It's not a significant part of the story. If you cut it out, it's irrelevant, but they really pushed for that.
Yeah.
You don't need it. It comes out of nowhere. And
because you work in this industry, that there are people there whose job it is to push for this kind of quote unquote representation on screens.
Well, look, since I've been going to film festivals and covered indie film, the kind of all the wokeness that you're talking about, that was woven into all, like, I'm used to it. Like, I was like a frog in a frying pan, in the sense that like everything is like, I mean, Star Trek was very progressive. It just was, but it didn't advertise that it was. It just was. And in fact, many of the aspects of it, fun fact, the original Star Trek series has been criticized because, the women in there wear mini skirts. But by the way, at the time, Nichelle Nichols played Uhura in the original Star Trek series. The mini skirt in the 60s was a symbol of women saying, F you, it's my body. We're going to wear mini skirts. It was a sign of resistance and rebellion. And originally, in the original Star Trek pilot, all the women wore pants. And then the female cast, when it went to the series, including Nichelle Nichols, they all came out in skirts and said, we want to wear this. So it's just so funny how like changing mores, like change, like that was a thing. Anyways.
Like back then, that was them being feminist, right? They were like,
exactly,
women's right to wear miniskirts.
Exactly. But a lot of the movies and things that I covered in the 80s, 90s, whatever, I mean, it's always been there, but it's been a limited audience, right? Like if you're seeing a lot of the politics, the things that are discussed, and I like any movie piece of content that challenges my beliefs. I like the conversation. I'm still going to be, and I'm very based. I don't consider myself left or right. I'm perfectly balanced.
Yes.
I'm not signed up for any team.
Yes.
Okay, or to be the mayor of my town here in lovely Pasadena, California, which is a very much like I grew up in the Midwest. But like so all of that has been in indie film, but it's a limited audience, right? So now what we're seeing is these ideas that were in movies that were made to open in 2 theaters and probably sell 10,000 DVDs are now leaking their way into mainstream entertainment, where it just seems out of place. right? It's
Yeah.
just, and it's being pushed. So I've seen that that's been around. All of these ideas have been around a very long time, a very long time. Since I was in college in the 80s, these ideas existed. What's new is two things. One, cancel culture, which is the result of the rise of social media, and reputation destruction, which is a tool of mostly, and I'm going to sound sexist for a minute, but bear with me.
Yeah.
When it comes to conflict, men are more physical. It just is what it is. We have fists, we're more physical. You're at a bar, guy bumps into you in the bar, shoulder bump, whether on purpose or not. You look at each other, there's always the threat of physical violence. Anytime I've been in I can count them on one hand, few number of fights in my life. And normally what happens is after you're done with it, you end up becoming friends. It's weird. It's a guy thing, right?
I've noticed this.
Yep. Yes. With women, it's mostly the tool is reputation destruction, which is to me, embodied or personified in someone like a Taylor Lorenz. She's all about reputation destruction. And that is a tool for the most part that women tend to use. Whereas men, it's all about physical violence, which creates this somewhat respect, where it's just like, we could get in a fight. Maybe you could take me. Maybe you never underestimate someone who may not be of your same physical stature, but like there's always a threat of physical violence when it comes to men being around men. It just is always there, whether it's never spoken, it just is. And with women, reputation destruction tends to be a tool used.
I think just based on my lived experience, to use some of their language, but I think you're right. And then whenever there is an outlier, like whenever I do see a man engaging in that kind of reputation destruction or whatever, it always puts me off, because it's like, I think because on a gut level, I view it as very cucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of a beta. Yeah. Like, okay, dude. Okay, so you think the two things that are different are cancel culture, reputation destruction.
Right.
Is it, when you're saying that these sort of the woke ideology's been around for a long time, I agree. I was indoctrinated in the late 90s at university. That's when I first encountered woke. All this stuff that's mainstream now, I was picking it up back then in my women's studies minor, the classes I was taking as part of that minor in the social sciences. And so I picked it up in academia, and I picked it up in my social circles, because I tended to move in these sort of leftist progressive circles, and it had already infiltrated a lot of that. So do you think now that it's gone mainstream, it's not limited to the indie films, or it's not limited to the social sciences, it's everywhere, it's mainstream now? Do you think that makes sense, though, that's why the indie films and the alternative culture and YouTube channels and stuff are the opposite? Because they're
it's possible. There's definitely been a you've seen the pushback, the so-called welcome to the rebellion, right? That aspect of it, but it's just interesting, because there's a documentary that's actually been in the works about Film Threat for a while, and the person that I started Film Threat with was very woke, right? Very woke, very much into when we started Film Threat, which was a zine in the 80s, when I was in film school, I was literally like a teenager, 18 at the time, and created this I'm going to do a punk rock fanzine, Film Threat. That sounds punk rock. And then met a guy named Andre Seawood, who provided I've got articles I want to write. But his things were practically like communist manifestos. And I was like, well, you're filling space with the articles. I'm going to do cartoons, and I'm going to do things that are kind of funny, and do almost like this is the precursor to memes, right? Where flyers and graphics and what. So I would do that stuff, and I'd write an article or a review here and there. But there was definitely a separation. We worked together for just over a year. And then it was just like, look, I want Film Threat to be fun. I want to leak subversive ideas, but I want to use humor to do that. Yes. Which is kind of like what we do today with memes. It's like, I feel like there's a simple way, whereas I'd read his articles and I don't understand half of what you're saying. You're actually using anti-disestablishmentarianism in a sentence, which was then, at least my memory, is the longest word. The most letters. But anyway, so we separated ways very early, after just over a year of working together, and I did Film Threat. and just sort of pursued the filmmakers I liked. I got to interview John Waters early on, and John Waters, I like to say, changed my life when I was 16. I saw the movie Pink Flamingos. John Waters is a gay filmmaker from Baltimore, Maryland, and he's not particularly woke. He just likes to make fun of everything. He makes fun of everything. He mocks, satirical. I mean, he did. And the thing is this, he'll have ideas. Sorry, go ahead.
I have an anecdote with him.
I love it.
Well, a story. When I used to work, one of the comedians I managed when I worked in Hollywood or Los Angeles was Margaret Cho. And every few years, we would book her for a run of shows in Provincetown where she could work out new material. Are you familiar with Provincetown? I'm sure it's super gay and in vacation spot. And anyway, we were there one summer when John Waters also was doing a run of shows. And then somehow this night after each of their shows, we ended up meeting up with him and this group of people. And we rode, I just have this very surreal memory of, we rode bicycles. I was on a bicycle following John Waters on his bicycle. And we went to his beach house in Provincetown, which was just as odd and strangely decorated, just so much fun, the way he had decorated. And anyway, I got to hang out in his beach house one night.
I'm jealous. But yeah, no, I've known John Waters since the 80s.
Oh, wow.
Because every movie that comes out, I'll interview him for it. Right. And just was a hero, because when I saw Pink Flamingos, like, think of the time I grew up, the 80s, John Hughes movies, right? Are like big. And then I went and saw a John Waters movie. I saw like Pink Flamingos.
So different.
Yeah, my personal favorite is Female Trouble of his early films. Okay. And like, they're very alternative. I remember being a little bit scared seeing Pink Flamingos, like, I can't believe you can even make a movie like this, because it's so alt culture. And I loved it. Like, I just embraced it. This is before I even started Film Thread. I like went down a rabbit hole of his movies. And then of course, David Lynch, and among others at the time, were like these, indie filmmakers. This is before the term independent film was a term. It didn't become a term until 1989, when the movie Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which played, it was not called the Sundance Film Festival. It was called the United States Film Festival. And then Robert Redford, he renamed it the Sundance Film Festival, and Sex, Lies, and Videotape played there. And it was supposed to be an exploitation movie, and it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and Harvey Weinstein at the time bought it and released it theatrically. And it changed everything, and it created the independent film, then became a category in the video store, and then a growing genre. It was sort of like the bucket that they threw any movie that didn't fit a mainstream movie, trauma films, etc. So I'm flexing all my nerd indie film knowledge. So my apologies.
I love it. I love this stuff. So since we're talking about, we're on a little bit of a tangent, I'm just going to ask you then. I loved David Lynch. He was my favorite director for a long time. Who are your favorite directors? You've named a few.
Well, I would say Steven Soderbergh is among them, because he's very much a DIY like filmmaker who's very much into realness of the performance, just capturing a reality, and he's no BS. He also mailed me a letter once. This is in the 90s. Steven Soderbergh sent me a letter and he said, "I hate your magazine. I think it's doing awful. Film Threat, how dare you say this about so-and-so. By the way, find and close a check for all back issues and a subscription to Film Threat." So I saved the letter. But
can you remind me? I know his name, but I'm not that. I know I've seen his movies. What are some of his big ones?
He did Sex, Lies, and Videotape. He did Ocean's 11. He's done a lot of movies. He did that movie Haywire with Gina Carano. His movies are just grounded in a reality. So he's someone that I really admire. Richard Linklater, of course. I thought Boyhood was incredible. And Slacker, and God, I mean, there are too many to name, but like I have a lot of it's filmmakers that they might not necessarily always be indie, but have an indie spirit. George Lucas, for example, is the world's most successful independent filmmaker. He was, and I don't think we'll ever see another George Lucas again in our lifetime, just because Fox thought, you want to hear something funny? Fox wanted to rename the movie Star Wars because their market research said that audiences thought the movie was about celebrities fighting. And he stuck to his guns, like, no, we're going to call it Star Wars. But, he was really smart. He gave up like part of his director's salary to improve the movie and to hold on to the sequel and merchandising rights. And 20th Century Fox thought he was crazy. Now, of course, he's the most renowned and successful indie filmmaker ever. But yeah, Kubrick, of course, your standard sort of classic directors, but also directors that people have never heard of. So, and I like, people like Brett Morgan, I think is a great documentary filmmaker.
I don't know him.
Brett Morgan, he did a movie called The Kid Stays in the Picture. He did also a documentary about Kurt Cobain called The Montage of Heck, which is it's one of the best documentary ever about Nirvana, and best documentary about a musical artist, in my opinion. He has a documentary coming out this fall about, I forget the name, but it's about David Bowie, and it's an IMAX documentary. I can't wait to see it.
Are you excited about the Elvis, the new Elvis that's coming out?
Yes, I'm seeing it. We'll see. I always wonder when a movie like that comes out, why are you making it now? What are we saying now about this person, in the present day, Elvis and his significance? Is it like there can't be another Elvis? I mean, I look at music today and I'm like, okay, I don't need my artists wearing strap-on dildos while they're performing for children. I'm kind of not about that as I like to think that I was a responsible parent. I would go into what I would call dad mode. And dad mode was when I had to be, and I don't mean this lightly. I mean, I think that it's important for young children to have a healthy fear of their parents. And I mean this in the sense that fear is a good motivator to want to do well, to impress your parents, that you did a good. Constantly handing out praise is awful. But like giving praise sparingly and then, being stern and a disciplinarian, kids want those guidelines. Weird story. We were talking earlier about pain. I recall my then wife at the time, it's 11 p.m. at night on a weekday. And I'm like, what are you doing building a log cabin out of paste sticks with glue? What are you doing? And it's like, well, our daughter has a project. It's due tomorrow. So I'm just going to do it for her. And I said, no, let her fail. Let her feel the pain. Because one thing that I'll tell you, when a child says they have a stomach ache, what they mean is they didn't do their homework. Or there's something at school that they don't want to confront and they have a stomach ache, so they don't want to go to school because they would have to confront that pain. And I'm like, no, let her fail. Let her get the failing grade. It's elementary school. It doesn't matter. Let her feel the pain. And the lesson is work on your projects and get them done on time. That's the lesson she needs to learn.
Yes.
In order to learn that lesson, you got to feel pain. And so what we do is with raising kids, we protect them from pain. When I say kids, I mean current adults, current young adults. Never got to experience pain. So pain is prescribed away with a pill. Pain is like, I'm going to do this. What I see on, and I only see TikTok when it shows up on YouTube or people talking about TikTok videos, but I see this like, celebrating mental illness. No, that's not something to be celebrated. That's something to power through. That's something to overcome so that you can, be your authentic self, but you're not your authentic. No, if you got 9 personalities and you're on TikTok performing them for people for clicks, that's not your authentic self. That's you figuring out who you are. And look, I didn't figure out exactly who I was until my 30s. I think that's fairly normal. I had kids when I was in my 20s. Now I have kids who are in their 20s. So it's possible to have good skin at this age. My recommendation is stay out of the sun and use a good moisturizer with UV protection.
I agree.
That's my regimen. Stay out of the sun. Wear a hat. I'm surprised you have a hat on right now.
Not today. Yeah, I wear a lot of hats and I have I have parasols. I don't care if I look like an old Asian lady when I wear it.
My girlfriend is she's an Asian lady and she's all about that. She's like, she said that, I love her phrase. If I could just, my girlfriend sometimes doesn't like when I mention her on podcast, but she says there are no ugly women. there are only lazy women.
Wow.
So it's, taking vitamins, take care of your body, drink a lot of water, stay out of the sun. If you're in the sun, use protection. Protection could be a parasol, it could be a hat, it could be, UV protection in your moisturizer. It's not that hard. It's like Bruce Campbell. I'm like, how do you look so good at your age? And Bruce Campbell's like, clean living. That's what it is. So that's why I got water right here, actually, when I'm done
So
with my
you were
coffee.
saying about the new Elvis movie, you were saying whenever something comes out, you wonder about the timing of it and what it
Right.
means. And then you were starting to talk about like music today.
Right. Well, it's like, what I'm saying is, what are we saying about Elvis? If you're any movie made in the present day is really, it's a comment on what's happening in present day, in particular if it's a movie from the past. For example, why do all the Roman epics from the 50s people speak in British accents? It doesn't make sense, right? Like, but what I'm saying is, there's a comment being made in movies today in the present day about Elvis as an artist that is maybe a comment about today. What I'm saying is, it's going to be there in some form. So I always wonder, well, why are we making this musical spectacle now? Why are we doing this now? And my feeling is it's a comment about, maybe it's a comment about music today. I don't know. I haven't seen the film yet.
Yeah.
But my suspicion is that, because this is true for most of this stuff, there needs to be a reason, something in the zeitgeist of why we're commenting on the past now. Sometimes it's to right some wrongs. I think that, this has been an oft repeated theme, but it's racism is bad. It's like, okay, after the 1000th Hollywood movie saying this, we get that it's bad. Like, we know, like, we understand it. And I think that there are a lot of messaging that gets repeated. I'm just curious what this new Elvis movie is trying to say, is what I'm saying.
I think you're right. Maybe I haven't seen it either. I am excited to see it. I think it might be about a commentary on music. I don't have a lot of love for music today. I hear a lot of it. One of my gig jobs involves me listening to a lot of new music, and I just found a lot of it terrible. And so maybe some of it's nostalgia too. I know a lot of people are trying to seem to be trying to escape where we're at culturally by revisiting I'm doing this a lot, watching old films, listening to old music. I find myself putting on movies from the 90s or the 80s, and rather than watching the new stuff. And so maybe it's sort of that, like, let's return to some of the culture from back then.
Yeah, and it's not as if there wasn't messaging woven into a lot of Hollywood films from the past. It's always been there. It's always been there. What is new is the overtness. And it used to be underneath the surface. Subtext was something that writers from the past were great at doing. Current day writers are terrible at subtext. They're terrible. They just put the messaging right on the surface. And that's where like average moviegoers notice it, roll their eyes, cringe. I've heard like people just go, like certain moments in movies where people just go, oh, I know what you're doing. One that stands out is in Endgame, when they had the sort of women can do it kind of scene where they all get together. And I just heard groans in the audience. It's just like, we know why you're doing this. Okay, we get it. But, they forget that like Marvel movies wouldn't be here today without female audiences love a shirtless Chris Evans, or a shirtless Benedict Cumberbatch. They're shirtless in every movie. It's probably part of a contract. You got to be shirtless. Chris Pratt, whoever, you're going to be shirtless if you're a male character in a Marvel movie.
Right.
And I think we've begun to, I've noticed this in a lot of films now, is desexualize both men and women.
Yes.
Which
I've noticed this. I'm glad you mentioned this, because I was going to ask you, one of my questions was, I don't notice as many, a lot of times action movie, it didn't matter the genre, action, thriller, there would usually be some sort of romantic subplot. And there would be two characters. Those were some of my favorite movies, in dramas or comedies or what have you. I feel like there's a lot less of that now. Even in the new Star Wars, at the end, she saves the day. Her love interest turns out is a bad guy, and he dies, and then she goes home with her droid.
Yeah,
And
well, let's not. The sequel trilogy was a complete disaster.
yeah.
Don't take me down that rabbit hole. I'm thankful
Okay.
Star Wars hasn't come up. But it's a touchstone because it's a movie in a franchise that everyone is familiar with. So it really is like a point where if you reference Star Wars, you're
We'll go
guaranteed.
down that.
Yeah, you're guaranteed. It's a quick way to make a point, but it was really in 2018 that I began to notice like the messaging was there, but it didn't bother me because I've been going to Sundance, and trust me, woke movies at people complain Sundance is woke. Sundance was always woke. Most film festivals were always progressive, taking on, whether it was gay marriage, whether it was legalizing marijuana. I mean, issue-based social justice movies have always been indie films and always been championed at film festivals. Why? Because limited audience. All these movies had a limited audience, but were influential. What's new is all of these ideas being infused into mainstream movies in a way where like they almost have to say like, look, we have our intersectional Black feminist gay character in the new Jurassic World movie. Are you happy you have someone to identify with? And on that question of identity, I find that simple-minded and stupid in the sense that people say they want to see themselves in a movie. Well, I grew up, thanks to my mother, she was just like, don't go to the mall to see those John Hughes movies. Those movies are stupid. Go to the art house and you got to see movies from other countries, Spain, French films, British comedies, Asian cinema. So I grew up with a very well-rounded, I say your media diet. It's important. It's important to have a broad range of foods you eat. Your media diet should be just as diverse, right? And when I use the word diversity, I always think diversity of thought, because diversity by immutable characteristics, I think, is lazy. That's why when people say this whole thing, well, I want to identify with the lead character who needs to look and be exactly like me. And I think that's lazy, because the purpose of fiction, all fiction, novels, comic books, movies, TV shows, all fiction is about identifying with someone who isn't you.
Yes.
Is not you. And so you get to see the world through that person's eyes. I saw the world through the eyes of Scarlett O'Hara when I watched Gone with the Wind when I was a kid. I'm seeing the world through her eyes and how she's trying to, get in the best place for herself and survive the war, right? Amongst all sorts of other drama. But like when I look at I always just saw myself in the character. That's the whole point of the protagonist. It's not about that the protagonists look exactly like you. I think that's lazy. But I also think audiences are lazy in the sense that you need to diversify your media diet. I've been watching Asian cinema since I was a kid, and Korean films, Japanese films, Toho monster movies, and all different types across the spectrum, right? There's just so much out there. You need to stop being lazy about your movie going. If you only see mainstream Hollywood movies, I understand how people can come to these conclusions, but these younger audiences, they don't have the sense of film history, right? And oh, it's they celebrate some sort of new barrier being broken in a film like it's never happened before, and it's happened before hundreds of times.
And they have no idea.
That's why I say, children in adult-sized bodies. So to me, and it's also an opportunity to learn to see the world through someone else's eyes who isn't you. So I tend to gravitate toward that kind of thing.
Do you see something similar going on with as there the audiences now, or I guess some people in the audience are like, I need to see someone who I can identify with in these very trivial ways, like gender and race and stuff. Do you see something similar happening with the actors like Tom Hanks, who are now saying, I have to be the exact same race and sexuality and sex of the person I'm playing? He was saying recently he would never do a gay role again because he's not gay.
One, I think that's stupid. I think that, look at how many cartoon animals. What is Mel Blanc supposed to not be a bunny to be able to play Bugs Bunny? When it comes to voice acting, I think that it's limiting. I think what you do is you hire the best actor. Having said that, if there is a choice between, an actor who maybe has more real world experience living that, I actually think that can help. But why shouldn't a gay person play a straight person? It doesn't. It's happened plenty of times through the history of film. Many gay actors have played straight people. Mm-hmm. We need to let this go. We need to let it go. And also, part of the reason Tom Hanks is being cast is not necessarily because there are financial concerns. It's not necessarily because of his talent. He's wildly talented actor. I'm not taking this away from Tom Hanks. I also think he's one of the short list of actors that understands the process. He understands the craft of film, which is why he's so successful. He's very good at picking project to be involved with, very good at pairing himself with filmmakers who are craftspeople. But I think that he's bankable. And that's part of the process. It's like, look, when I was at G4 TV, I was probably the least paid. And there were women who did less work than I did who got paid more. Why? Probably because people want to tune in to see them more than me. I don't care. I think in entertainment, it's not equitable. When it comes to, sex work, adult film actors, the women get paid more than the men. It's just what the market pays.
Yeah. It's like women's basketball when they complain about our salary's not the same. It's like, yeah, it's based on what the audiences want to see. It's like, it's not going to be exactly the same as what the men are getting.
Exactly. Just like it is what it is. The world isn't fair, and it will never be. And this sort of striving towards some utopia that's in the brains of this generation is it's harmful. It's harmful. I think wrong lessons are being taught, and the wrong things are being celebrated that are only going to do damage. And I just see it just based on my parenting experience. And like I said, parenting, and I see it just as like kids that were not parented well, because you have children raising children. And I really think the secret to parenting is really just like you do what you say you're going to do, meaning you give guidelines and you lay out the consequences. And if your child crosses the line, then you follow through on the consequences, whatever that punishment is. It's taking away privileges, it's grounding, it's you're not going to get that thing, and you never give a kid a thing. A kid always works for it. If they're not necessarily working for the money, but you must do X to earn X. It's very simple. I'll give you an example. I can tell you, for everyone in the audience that has a young child that they want to get out of diapers, I'm going to tell you how to potty train your kid in a week.
Okay.
This lesson was passed down to me, but it's instructive because it'll tell you this applies to lots of things. So what you do is, one, your child, and first of all, as a dad who changed diapers, I don't like to change diapers. I changed diapers. I didn't like doing it. It's messy. I don't want to do it.
Who does?
Yes, nobody does, right? I always describe it as unmaking a burrito. But anyways, so there's a point at which your kid is kind of interested. You want to be able to do things like go to barbecues or do family things and not have them have to change diapers or whatever. So once they're interested, you get a giant jar, clear jar. You fill it with Skittles or M&Ms or whatever. You put it in a very high shelf where it cannot be reached in the bathroom. You put the potty there, and every time they go in the potty, they get to pick one from the jar, and they can see the jar. It's in sight. Now, you're going to get bugged a lot of times with a dribble in the potty, which is fine. In a week, it's Pavlov's dog. They're going to be trained. Now, that applies to raising kids in other types of situations, right? Incentivizing, rewarding, consequences. That also applies to management. When you're managing a team, I had to learn how to manage a team. If we have 30 writers from all over there, I can't take credit for Film Threat's a thing I started. It's a group. It's a group of people from all over the world writing reviews. I'm sort of the face person for it. But it's passionate writers. And we have people within the Film Threat organization. We have an ardent New York feminist who writes for Film Threat. We have a Christian conservative who writes for Film Threat. We have all types of people across the spectrum.
I love that.
We have a very flamboyantly gay writer who loves horror films, specifically horror.
Is it Mike Harlow? I'm kidding.
No, it's my friend. I'll tell you, it's my friend Norman Gidney. He does a
Okay.
website called Horror Buzz, and he writes for us. And he'll write about gay cinema. Sometimes he doesn't write about gay cinema, whatever. What we do is when a movie comes in for review to Film Thread, an indie movie, we look at like, well, who already kind of loves documentaries or who loves gay cinema, right? We just kind of get it to the person who kind of is predisposed to like it, but understand that arena, understand that type of movie. But it's and we've got writers that are woke, that I would consider woke, but we are not infected by a sense of activism because we review movies. I like to say Film Thread is politically agnostic. We are not, Film Thread is not like championing any particular political ideology.
That's what it should be.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
But I look at almost all the media out there. I'm not going to name names, but almost all the media that covers the same stuff I do, and they're politically aligned. Hence what happened to Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman? It was shunned by the critical community. I mean, if you despise the ideology so much, why not write a bad review of the film so it has a bad Rotten Tomatoes score? That's certainly within a critic's power to destroy a movie. And it just shows how weak-willed the people in that position are. And I like to say that most of the entertainment media in Hollywood is it's controlled by publicists who kind of like put out the narrative. It's no different than your MSNBC or CNN. There's a narrative put out by Hollywood publicists about how entertainment is to be covered. And what's broken that narrative are people like Nerdrotic, Ryan Cannell, people like yourself, people like Comics Division, As from Heel versus Babyface, Geeks and Gamers crew, like that crew, amongst others, has said, we're not going to go with what Hollywood is generally saying. We're going to have our own opinion about something. And sometimes Hollywood something comes out and people love it and champion it, like The Northman or Top Gun. And then sometimes they don't. But I really noticed it in 2018 where this ideology was bubbling mainstream. It was in 2018 when I noticed The Last Jedi came out. And I hated that first Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens. I thought it was terrible. I thought Han Solo. I did a video for another channel, Film Courage, where I talk about the deaths of legacy characters and how they should be treated respectfully. And I compared it to the death of Spock in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I'm going down a nerd rabbit hole. Please stick with me.
That's okay. I'm with you.
But when Last Jedi came out, I'm like, oh, I kind of like the direction that this is going. And I saw that they had basically made Luke into this weak character, but I thought that was a setup for him to come back because the next movie is called The Rise of Skywalker. It's going to be a Christ-like tale where he's going to go to the Jedi spirit realm, come back and wreak havoc, right? I thought it was a setup because it's boring to watch a character win all the time. Yeah. This is the sort of, so when you see a character lose, like in the first Raiders of the Lost Ark movie, literally, Dr. Jones loses everything. He doesn't even win at the end. The villains win, the Nazis win, they get the Ark, he's tied up to a pole. Then it's given away to the FBI to be like, it's literally a movie where the protagonist loses the entire movie. That's exciting to watch because that's how you grow. Pain is how you grow. Loss is how you learn, like all these things.
And in the audience, it's building that desire to see the comeback.
Yes, see the comeuppance. Like that's why you need to see the movie RRR, please. And you'll see it's very spiritual film. I would love to hear what you think of that film. I think you and your husband would love it actually. And it's on Netflix, RRR. So, but I thought that was a setup. But then when I began to notice was because I watched Gary, I watched Eric July, I would watch I love nerd stuff. So I'm watching them on YouTube and whatnot. And I'm like, they were just attacked for their opinions. And I'm like, but half of what I enjoy is an opinion that is counter to my own. It's like, how do I learn something? Sometimes you can convince me, sometimes you can't. But I'm going to argue my point. And when I see FNT, Friday Night Tights reminded me of, that's the conversations we would have at comic book stores. Those are the conversations we'd have at video stores. We would just yell at each other, stalwarts in our opinion. This is the best Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Yes.
Or whatever. This is the argument, that is the thing. And when I began to see them attacked in ways that I didn't feel were fair, because I saw these guys as a bunch of dudes who have a sense of humor about themselves. And that to me, I think that's the overriding thing, even though at Film Threat, everyone is very different. It's this eclectic group of misfits, movie misfits. The one thing everyone who sticks around Film Threat for years is you have to have a sense of humor about yourself.
Of course. You have to be able to take a joke. Yeah.
I take my work seriously. I don't take myself seriously. I make jokes about myself. We get along, and there hasn't been, even though we have woke writers at Film Threat. You're going to read stuff on Film Threat that is from a woke perspective, which I believe needs to be represented, along with, say, a Black conservative who's giving a view of a movie, say, like Uncle Tom, right? Mm-hmm. Or, another movie that didn't get a lot of play, a movie I would recommend, is called The Boys in Red Hats, which is about the Covington kids.
Oh, I didn't see that one. I saw Uncle Tom, The Boys in Red Hats.
Boys in Red Hats. I recommend if you want a bunch of movie recommendations, I do an annual, I was so annoyed with the Oscars and the Spirit Awards and how they tend to only award one type of movie. We started our own award show. We've done it now for 4 years in a row. It's called Award This, and it's on my Film Threat YouTube channel. Okay. So if you see it, we give awards to these movies. In fact, the director of The Boys in Red Hats won an award at that. Shut-In, the filmmakers behind Shut-In, won an award. But also there are movies that are gay and woke, and they won awards too. This is the thing and this is where I began to recognize this problem in 2018. They're attacking Gary from Nerdrotic just for having an opinion. Mm-hmm. He didn't and he had very good reasons for liking Last Jedi. And I've since changed my opinion about it. Like, I see it now. And I see it now because I was kind of viewing it through the lens of the story's not done yet. The story's not done yet. I believe in Disney. They're gonna land the plane. They're gonna stick the landing, so to speak, and they're gonna pay all of this garbage off. It's gonna pay off to something big. Well, it didn't. But what I saw was the attacks that Eric July, that whole FNT group, was being attacked, and I couldn't believe it. And even Jeremy from The Quartering, I invited him to be on a panel at San Diego Comic-Con. I just assumed. I didn't realize there was a divide in ideas where people couldn't talk to each other or felt physically threatened. And I invited Jeremy from The Quartering, hey man, I'm doing a panel called The Last Jedi Debate. I'm going to have people who hate the movie and people who love the movie. I'll be the moderator. Join my panel. And he was he had misgivings about attending and for legitimate reasons. I don't want to speak for him. But I didn't realize there's a real divide in fandom. I understand divides in politics. That's just normal, right? I didn't realize it was so deep seated. And then when I began to see people being vilified for having different opinions about, name the thing, you're an evil person because you like a movie, dislike a movie or a piece of media. I don't get it. Not being able to have these conversations like that is irksome to me. So, part of a thread of a documentary I'm working on now called Attack of the Doc is at least revealing and it's about this movie Attack of the Show, and which started in 2005, and sort of a time before all this stuff. How did we get here? How did we become so divided when we can't even agree on a movie, or liking or disliking a character in a movie makes you a racist? Racist is a term that when I heard that, someone's a racist, oh my God, someone's a racist. I grew up in Michigan, where at the time when I was in college, my girlfriend happened to be Black. Mm-hmm. And we just were both nerds. We both like Batman, right? We're both into Batman comics, nerdies. We're into new wave music, going to concerts, whatever. And I experienced real racism. I'm talking about skinheads with swastika tattoos, the real racism, not someone not liking a TV show. I think they've lowered the bar for what racism is or any of this stuff.
They have, and they've made a mockery out of, they belittle actual racism. It's they don't even care, because it's the boy who cried wolf, because now they use that word so much that people are less likely to take it seriously when they're talking about. Now you have to say things like, I'm talking about real racism.
Right. Yeah. You have to actually say real racism, not and it's, the word has been diluted. There is no, I don't think we understand the damage that's been done by that. And that word should not be thrown around lightly. And now it's being used to deplatform people, to diminish voices, or to reputation destruction. It's used in that way. And I think, this is, I tweeted recently that it's jokes has devolved into explaining comedy to stupid people. that's what it's devolved into. Because I've watched like these comedy specials, including like Ricky Gervais' most recent comedy special, where he's actually explaining the joke while telling the joke. Joe Rogan's recent comedy special, he did the same thing. And when I say recent, I think it was a couple years ago. But I'm looking at it going like, do we have to do this now? This is what comedy is. And I feel like a lot of it is not standing up to people who really need to be stood up to, or just say, no, you're stupid. Now, I've noticed that, Film Thread, it's like there's this very pandering and condescending thing that at least I felt it was condescending. It's called Female Filmmaker Friday.
Okay.
And what you would do is on Fridays, you would use the hashtag Female Filmmaker Friday, and you would like talk about female movies. And I'm like,
on Twitter?
think that's Twitter thing.
I think I may have participated in this when I was at SJW. How long's this hashtag been around?
It's been around a while. And can I just say, when I first saw it, I think it's stupid. Can I tell you why I think it's stupid? Because if we cover a filmmaker who happens to be a woman, that's called a Tuesday at Film Thread.
Yes.
It's just, if we cover a filmmaker who's not white, that's just a Monday. It's like these things.
You put them in a ghetto when you do that. It's like,
yes,
my husband's a musician, and he was talking about this where someone, I can't remember the context, but someone had said, she's a great female drummer. And he's like, no, she's a great drummer. Like, stop saying that like it's a compliment that she's a great female drummer. No, she's a great drummer.
Right.
And you think you're doing something good because I'm lifting up female drummers. No, you're not. You're putting her in some box where she's defined by her sex instead of by just being a great drummer.
Well, real inclusion is just not calling attention to it. It's just everyday life. And I used to notice when I would go to film festivals in the 90s, they'd always have, it's the Women Filmmakers Showcase. And it would be in a smaller venue at an odd time, and nobody would attend. And I'm like, why don't you just take these movies, take the best of these movies, and just put them in the normal film festival? Or there'd be the Black Filmmakers Showcase. And I was like, why are they doing this? Like, I always despised that because I thought it was pandering. I thought, and it just, I guess I could use the word othering, whatever. But I think that that's not my job with Film Thread. It's like, these are just movies. We're just going to cover them. And oftentimes when a movie is submitted to us for review, we don't know who made it or what their ethnicity is, because it doesn't matter. And we're not going to also, conversely, we're not going to give a film a better review or a more favorable review because it's made by a certain type of person. That's not good either. That's like with the recent Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, like that was like, by stating up front what you were trying to do, he just said, I'm going to look for the best person. And it just happened to be her. That would have been awesome. But by doing that, she will always be viewed as differently in that way. I think that, I mean, we don't need to go down a Biden rabbit hole.
No, but it's the same phenomenon. Yes, it is actually racist and sexist to say, I'm going to pick the best Black woman. Like, just pick the best person. And then that doesn't follow them around. And by the way, if I were offered something like that after somebody said they're going to pick the best woman and then they offered it to me, I'd be like, no, thank you, because now everyone thinks I got it because of my sex.
Yeah, this isn't working. I mean, corporate America is just starting to wake up to this. You've seen the problems that have happened within Disney. You've seen, we've seen this start to play out, and I do believe the pendulum is just, it's here, and it's just maybe starting to go back. Maybe I have it the other way. Maybe go this way. I'm just saying that I believe that the pendulum, people are starting to wake up to that. But it was 2018 when I saw all of these YouTubers vilified for having an opinion because it didn't necessarily line up. And I began to open my eyes, and we had this last Jedi debate at San Diego Comic-Con. And I just brought people who love the movie and people who dislike the movie. And I just wanted them to talk to each other because I couldn't believe that people were being treated. And then I like kind of opened my eyes, like, oh, I see some of the points that the people who dislike the movie, I understand what they're trying to say. Like, I get it now, but I also think, like, just wait until this next movie comes out. It's going to solve everything. And of course I was wrong, and I'm willing to admit it. But we live in a weird time of people falling in line as somehow being virtuous, or the pile-ons that happen on social media. I think there have been several attempts to cancel me, which I find humorous.
What are some of them? I don't know how long I have you, but
Oh yeah, well, just
Yeah.
yeah, like whenever you want to wrap up. But like a funny story. It was because I've been part of going to Comic Cons for a long time. I've been going to San Diego Comic Con since 1989. I always do panels. The panels usually have like a fun theme or whatever. So I was doing this panel called Fanfic Theater. Okay. So Fanfic Theater was we would get the description of the panel was like we find crazy fan fiction on the internet and then it's performed out loud by comedians and actors.
This sounds so fun.
Yeah, so we would get friends of mine who are comedians and actors. I'd invite them on. And then what we do is we bring up people from the audience too. And I have printouts of the fanfic. Well, what the audience didn't know that we wrote the fanfic. So like we were writing it because fanfic is all pretty much the same. It's all fiction where, it's characters in like, Harry and Ron Weasley, and they end up having sex. It's very homoerotic.
It's always the same.
It's always the same.
Well, and some of it's not. I know that most of it's homoerotic, but some of it's not. Some of it's straight. I used to read Guilty Confession. I used to read Lost fanfic.
Oh, that's fun. Well, look, it's fun. I discovered fanfic like back in the 80s about Kirk and Spock, and we did an article about it in an old issue of Film Threat when it was in print. But like, so we would write this fanfic and it was over the top and ridiculous. It was like a parody of fanfic. One of the ones I wrote was called Jurassic Pratt. And it was all the characters. Someone had cloned every character Chris Pratt ever played, and they have a gay orgy. And it's nothing is ever overtly sexual. It's all like, it's all spoken. You don't ever use dirty words in fanfic. Right. You use like, you use another word for something is peach-shaped bottom, it's all like it's all
euphemisms.
Euphemism. So I wrote about it. So we wrote the description of the panel. I'm like, it was like Adrienne Curry was on the panel, which is, you should interview Adrienne Curry. She was the first, she was on America's Next Top Model. She was the first one.
Okay.
And just look up Adrienne Curry. She would do it. Other friends of mine were comedians like Tommy Bechtel, Yoshi Obayashi, who's a great comedian. You should look him up. He's amazing. So I just get them and we get like friends of mine are actors. Then you bring up a couple people from the audience. They're kind of shy and it's the awkwardness that makes it fun. We fill a room and it was packed. So apparently a fanfic group on Tumblr found the description in the panel guide of, I think it was WonderCon, and posted it there, and all this hate, they piled on me like, and it was literally maybe 100 young girls, I'm going to guess, based on the anime avatars that were just piling on like, how dare you do this? Well, WonderCon paid attention. They're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? I mean, these people are not really a threat in real life, right? Yeah. None of them are actually attending WonderCon. Well, the Hollywood Reporter did a story about it. Comic-Con had to issue a press release. It became this scandal. This is in 2015. You can just look it up.
Wow.
You can look up my name, fanfic, WonderCon, and there's a story about it. And, it was an attempt to cancel me. Like, how dare you take our fanfic that we wrote and read it? They didn't understand. I had to explain, like, we actually wrote the fanfic. This is a fun thing we do. But it's taken all the fun out of these conventions where now they're like, they're afraid to do any panel that might offend anybody.
What if we offend someone? Yeah.
We're really living now in this climate of fear, and I don't care. I reached that point in 2018 because I was standoffish. Like, this is like, I'll never work in the corporate world again. Like, I just, I'm too old and I just don't fit the type.
And
right?
you have the freedom to do what you want.
Well, yes. So now it's just like, look, I decided then I'm like, look, Film Thread has been like this side gig that I did and like led to other work, writing books, doing other, creating opportunities for myself. I've produced movies and whatnot. So like, I just thought like, I got to make this a big thing. So it was 2018 and that sort of awakening and seeing, and I think like around the same time, if I recall correctly, that was like around when you began to kind of wake up around that time.
Yeah. Mine was like, it started in 2016, but it was a slow process. So,
right.
Yeah. 16, 17.
I think you were definitely more embedded in the SJW stuff. I was like, well, these are like, these are the types of movies that play Sundance. I always saw the woke movies as like, those are Sundance movies and almost nobody watches those. And now I'm like, oh, well, those ideas are now in big movies.
Yes.
And so it's like, and the audience is pushing back. I mean, you see the failure of Buzz Lightyear, the Lightyear movie. I think that failure, that not performing, I think that's, I think it says something. Audiences don't like it. They don't like it. Make a small movie, make a small indie, create a different label, right?
Yeah.
And do it, not a $200 million movie, make a $2 million movie. I think it'll be really successful, the math. There's no reason that those ideas can't exist, or that marketplace. Although my friends who are gay, who happen to be gay or lesbian, they always say like, oh, gay movies can be so annoying because there's such a sameness about them. There's such a victim quality to them. They just sort of roll their eyes, just
sort
like
of a preachiness.
A preachiness that, like, we don't need it. Just tell a story of two people. It doesn't need to be, it does,
And
yeah,
here's your heavy-handed message. Let me
exactly.
ask you, Chris, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
I think because I can hear they want to start doing construction in the
Oh, there
next
you
room.
go. Construction. That's
Yeah.
cool.
So where do you see things headed? This is something I like to ask people just to
Ooh.
get a range of perspectives. Where do you see things headed both in film and in the culture at large?
I think it's going to change, but slowly. I think what's going to happen is, well, one, it's like Hollywood already moves at a glacial pace. That's just, everyone uses that term. It's a glacial pace. So it's like taking a battleship and doing a 180. You can't do it. It's going to take a long. So we're looking at 5 years, I think, more of this, because there are things that were greenlit 2 years ago that haven't come out yet, or things that are in development that haven't come out. But I think there's now an awareness and an awakening. And I have a friend of mine who's a working screenwriter who's seen a lot of this stuff change. And I think that there's a realization that maybe we shouldn't have hired people just for certain reasons, just to fill a quota, who are inexperienced. There needs to be more mentoring, right? And there needs to be more of an awareness that audiences are pushing back on it. Look, #1 movie of the year is Top Gun Maverick. There's nothing overtly, I don't even think that movie is necessarily overtly political, right? It's an adventure. It's a hero story. It's also a redemption tale. I think Tom Cruise is underestimated as an artist. I think he always thinks about the audience. He's one of the, so I do think it's just going to take a long time. It's going to take more hits like Top Gun, more failures like Lightyear, and more failures for them to notice this. I think that certain brands are unsavable, like Star Wars and Marvel. I think the damage is done. And I don't think that you can save those brands. And I've checked out. After The Rise of Skywalker, I just don't really care. Sure, The Mandalorian's fine. So I really think it's going to be 5 years of this. In that time period, there's an opportunity. And the opportunity is this. What the Daily Wire, that's an opportunity. I'd like to see the Daily Wire not just put their movies out on their platform, but put them out commercially. I mean, What is a Woman should have played in theaters.
Yes.
Should have played in the publicity from that alone. It should have been available on Vudu. Maybe, and this is the thing, and I'm just saying this, maybe someone from the Daily Wire watches this. Who knows? Yeah. The idea can get back to them. Look, in order for those ideas to really take hold, or at least the discussion to take hold, people fear even having the discussion. And this is like, by the way, I had an experience where a teacher wanted to put my son on Ritalin because he was inconvenient in the classroom. I'm like, you're not putting my son on drugs. I can't imagine if what's happening today was in my kid's school, because they wouldn't have been there. Like, and I think that the fury that, and what's going to be unleashed politically, I think the political landscape is going to change quicker than the entertainment landscape. And the reason is there's a very popular T-shirt that Beto wore. And I'd like to see a version of that T-shirt that just says, "Don't mess with my kids." That is a message I think that's going to resonate.
Yes.
And whatnot. But I think that it's with entertainment is going to take longer to change because it's economic. You've seen, like, even the new head of CNN is like, we want to get rid of the people that are overtly one-sided. Let's try to be more. The CNN was always the middle of the road, right? Was always like, the center. And I would describe my politics as center, So
it's interesting. The last show I sold before I left entertainment was it's a CNN show, and it's overtly woke, and it's still on the air.
Oh, is that the Kumail?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
United Shades of America.
Ooh, I saw a clip from that. I've never watched the show, but I saw a clip from that. That was about Father's Day. That was horrifying.
I'm not surprised. I haven't seen that clip, but when I was leaving woke, I knew a lot of people who were going further into it. I think these acceleration points in culture, when when it really ramps up and like becomes a little more mainstream each time, that's when there's an opportunity for people to open their eyes or to close them and stick their head in the sand and go further in, double down, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that shows a big double down parade.
But it doesn't, it's not resonating on a mainstream level. And to me, it's like I said earlier, it's like the Sundance movies appeal to a small audience. I think wokeness appeals to a small audience. It's a fraction of the audience. And I think that Hollywood is waking up to this. I think Hollywood's filled with a lot of guilt because, let's be honest, most people that are in the power positions in Hollywood are white people.
Yeah.
And they feel guilty, and they may not have had not everyone in my family is white. I have a stepsister who happens to be black and a stepbrother who also happens to be black. And like, I kind of just had an awareness at a young age. That's why I say become aware was sort of our mantra when I was in like college, was like, oh, you just become aware of this stuff. You don't allow it to affect your decisions. Right. And I feel that a lot of guilty white people in these power positions hiring woke people as a way to absolve themselves of some sort of guilt. And then they're influenced by these assistants who are involved in greenlighting the wrong projects or infusing it. Well, you got to have this happen in the movie. And like, they're weak-willed, whether it's someone like a Kevin Feige or whatever the guy's the head of Disney now. Like, these people are weak, and they're like, all right, fine, I'll give you that one win. And it ends up being a too many cooks. It ruins it. You need someone strong like a Tom Cruise or Jerry Bruckheimer to say, nah, we're not doing that. Nah, this movie's for everybody. If you identify with someone, cool. If not, whatever. It's also, you know what? It's going to be sexy. Shirtless men on a beach playing football, covered in oil. It's going to be sexy.
Get over it.
Women are going to be sexy too. They're going to be heels and mini skirts. You know, Jennifer Connelly is freaking sexy. Oh my God. Like, at her age, I mean, I love that she's allowed herself to just age naturally. She looks beautiful. She's stunning. Like, more of that. Like, that's so I really think we're 5 years away from seeing any significant change in Hollywood, but it's going to be more and more successful movies, and then movies flopping. Politics, wait till the fall. Wait until the fall. I think the beast that's been awakened is parents, and finally, you know, people just saying, no, we don't want this. No, we don't want it. We don't want this stuff in our schools. No, stop it. And it's going to be firing people. And I think that you're looking at maybe as related to some of these kids that have gone through, you know what I'm talking about. I think you're going to see lawsuits.
You are.
I think you're going to be huge lawsuits over this. And I feel for the children that have fallen down this trend. I feel for them. My heart goes out to them. And I think that my one big complaint about Matt Walsh's documentary, I'll end on this. I know you got your people there. Where are the parents? There needs to be an entire documentary about the parents.
Yes.
None of this would happen without the parents.
It's everything you talked about. And I think a lot of it goes back to that. It's responsible parenting.
Yep. And the parents haven't learned to be parents, which is, you got to be tough. You see a kid, your screen is not the babysitter. I see that a lot. I see that, like, just the screen. Now I don't have to pay attention to my kid. I can't tell you how much I've seen in my own neighborhood, a young child in a stroller with a screen and the parent with the screen. It's disgusting. So
addiction.
Anyways, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that indie film is my passion. Indie film is going to flip. Indie film is going to be making the kind of movies Hollywood used to make. And other countries like India are making movies that Hollywood used to make with this movie, RRR. And Keri, God, it's just been a pleasure to talk to you because I'm such a fan.
I love talking to you.
Watched you for years.
We have to do this again.
We will.
And tell people where they can find you. We're going to put all this below, and you guys can find in the description, but just where they can find you online.
We're real easy. I am Film Threat on everything. My website is filmthreat.com. You can go there, and it's real easy if you want to reach out to me for any reason. And I recommend you read it every day, 3 to 5 reviews. I am also personally that Chris Gore. You'll find me on Instagram and socials. I don't tweet very much, but when I do, it's probably about Cinnabon.
Please
There
do
you go.
that Cinnabon tweet.
All right.
Okay.
Fine.
Thank you, sir. Thank you guys
Great.
for hanging out with us. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe if you like the video, or hit dislike. I can't see it anymore if you dislike it. YouTube removed that, so feel free to hit it. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.